going back to it when you were talking about the JFK documentary. There's a part of it where the CIA agent, they're talking about Oswald, and a part of it in the story where in the documentary they're talking about the other agent whose name is Thomas Arthur Valley, right? Thomas Arthur Valley. Very interesting, where it shows, they have a couple other attempts on assassination on Kennedy, one of them being November 2nd in Chicago, the other one being November 18th in Tampa, and he's supposed to go on this 27-mile, Yeah. And then they say you shouldn't do this. This Valley guy, ex-Marine, Oswald, ex-Marine, was at the Japan base. He's at the Japan base. He trained
another base there in Japan.
But in Japan, CIA, Cuba training, same here. He was at a 6 or 7-story building, almost identical to the building. And then the entire time while this is going on, and I'm talking to Jim Jenkins, I said, Jim, let me ask you a question. Who do you think was behind this? Who do you think caused all of this? And I'm asking him names. I said, what do you think about Lyndon Johnson? And he says, I don't trust Lyndon Johnson. I said, tell me why. So, the story behind Lyndon Johnson being way more ambitious than John F. Kennedy, and he was so upset with the fact that these guys took office and behind closed doors. So from your end, when you were doing the investigation, and, JFK wanted to get rid of CIA and Lyndon Johnson wanted to go Vietnam, John F. Kennedy didn't want to go Vietnam, these things that they had. How much I felt like that documentary could have gone a little bit deeper on LBJ's motivation. What did you learn about LBJ at the end?
This is a very good question, and I'm reluctant to point at Johnson for the murder. As I said at the time in 1991, I do believe totally he was responsible for the cover-up, because he starts with the Warren Commission. He does everything possible, and if you remember the documentary, there's even a scene when he's talking to McNamara. You hear the phone conversation where he says, "I didn't agree with you and the president that we should pull out of Vietnam." He's very, very pointed. So I don't think, though, he wanted to go to Vietnam. I think that was on the agenda because we had already started the process of Vietnam with Eisenhower, not with Kennedy. With Eisenhower, we started the process of supporting the French, paying for the French war. So Kennedy fell into the trap. He sent advisors, not combat troops, but he insisted no combat troops. He insisted to the very end. He insisted no combat troops go to Laos either. No combat troops are going to go to Cuba. That's the reason the Bay of Pigs, he was hated by the Cuban community after 2-3 years of this. He refused to send American troops into Cuba. Kennedy knew what war was, knew what it meant. He'd been on that PT boat. He'd seen he'd been at the lower level, and he knew he didn't believe the generals. He saw the fallacy of this belief that the generals know everything. He comes into office, the first thing he's presented with is Eisenhower's SIOP plan, SIOP 62, to blow up the world. There is a plan, that they were going to attack China and Moscow, Russia first. And the first strike option was also on the table. It still is in the United States. The first strike option is still on the table, and very much a consideration in this Ukraine debate, by the way, because certainly that's one of the things the Russians fear the most is encirclement and NATO and nuclear arms in the Polish, Romanian, and possibly Ukrainian hands. There it is, single integrated operational plan. It's a wicked plan, and it was devised by people who were basically paranoid. You saw the movie Dr. Strangelove. You saw the military people as pictured there.
Can I read this to the audience real quick? The single interrogator was the United States General Plan for Nuclear War from 1961 to 23, gave the President of the United States a range of targeting options and described launch procedures and targets set against the nuclear weapons would be launched. The plan integrated the capabilities of nuclear tired. So interesting.
This is a system. This is an industry. This is not just a plan. This is a business of billions of dollars. How much have we spent since 1947 on our defense? It's out of proportion to anything we really needed for our defense. It's basically to dominate the world, to have 800 bases in every country practically we can in the world. And it's a gigantic operation, but a lot of people, contractors, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, make a fortune on this thing, a fortune on this business. So to close this down, to start to reduce it, is the hardest thing to do in the world. Since Jack Kennedy was president, no American president has gone close to even trying to interfere with the military, with that system, to really cut back, or at the same time interfered with the intelligence agencies of this country. Remember, he said very clearly after the Bay of Pigs, because they had given him false information and they betrayed him there, he said, we're going to destroy. I'd like to shatter the CIA and scatter it to the winds. I forgot the exact quote, but he certainly made the effort. He fired Allen Dulles, who was the head of the CIA, was a respected, revered figure from the 1950s under Eisenhower. His brother was John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State, who set this policy not of neutrality, but of rollback. It wasn't even... Containment had been the American policy towards communism. Rollback, this is what Dulles wanted. And he wanted brinksmanship. He believed in brinksmanship. And that's what was going on right now. The same people are back in the State Department and giving that kind of advice to Joe Biden. But, okay, we're there now again. We're potentially at another Cuban Missile Crisis, potentially. Going back to this system that existed, Kennedy was trying to change it. And the moment he went killed, the whole thing changes. We keep going. All the presidents, they're puppets, basically. They operate within a certain parameter. They can't touch the two most important things are the intelligence agencies and the military industrial.
Do you two have a similar opinion on who actually killed JFK?
Yeah.
Well, we haven't gotten there yet.
Well, what is your opinion? I'm curious.
Well,
on who
my
killed
opinion
him.
is based on what years of thinking about it, but frankly, it can't. Johnson was a weakling compared to what we're dealing with here. Johnson was the loser. He was a vice president, and he had a lot of scandal in his life, so he was not in a position of great strength, which makes him all the more suspect. But he would have been very suspect if something had happened to Kennedy. The people who did this have to be at the very top of the society. They had to be CIA. And the only people I can really think work are the Dulles people, because he was the king of the CIA. And although he had been fired, he was still in Washington, and he was very active. His people were still there. Kennedy fired Bissell and Cabell, but the people left in the CIA. You have to clean out the whole agency, as Harriman said that. You cannot leave those people in place. Richard Helms became the new traffic cop. He became the new real head. McCone was appointed, but he was a figurehead. Helms and that gang were still there. And those are the guys you really got to look at, because they were moving the Oswalds around the map to Russia. This is what Dulles did. They had a program. Angleton was another guy, James Angleton, who ran that program, putting American defectors into Russia for information. We wanted land-based information. We had spy, we had U-2 flights and all that, but they wanted people on the ground. They sent over quite a few defectors. How'd they get there and how they came back is a very interesting story. And of course, Oswald is hardly examined. He's also given money. It's just a strange, strange story. We go into it. The fingerprints of intelligence are all over Oswald. It's very clear from, if you watch these, even the 2 hour will make that very clear.
Yeah.
So if you have that intelligence, but even at that level, Dulles would not have been. Dulles had to be given the go-ahead by someone else, and the only people I can think of is the people who basically run this country, basically East Coast financial people from the establishment, and that goes to a high level. And that doesn't mean everybody. They're not sitting around a conference room. It just means he has to have a conversation. Is it okay? This president is a problem. He's antagonized big business with the steel price hike. He's made it very clear his pacifist tendencies and his getting along with these third world countries. He's anti-colonial, very much the Irish rebel. This is going to be a problem because he's going to get elected in '64, and then his brother, Robert, who's a tough guy, he fought the mob. He's going to come in 60 and 72 potentially, 76, and then there's this other younger brother, Teddy, who was already in the Senate, and he's going to be next. Could be a dynasty. They're scared of Roosevelt. Roosevelt had been there for 15 years. 15 years of Roosevelt. They were scared. A lot of these people were shaken, like my father. They didn't want to see another renaissance of democratic rule, people's rule. They don't believe in people's democracy. They don't believe the people should run the country. No, they want control. And so that's the whole thing. The Eisenhower and Reagan are so anti-Roosevelt. They all their policies are gradually dismantling the New Deal. And you see that through the whole 1980s, 90s. Even now, we have some remnants of the New Deal, which I think are very good, but they're going to be under fire. They're going to be under threat.
So if you enjoyed this little segment from the podcast, click over here to watch the entire podcast. And if you've not subscribed to the channel, please do so. Take care, everybody.